In the summer of 1867, in the pastoral landscapes of Missouri's farming country, a darkness emerged that would challenge the very foundations of 19th-century understanding of human nature. Timothy Caldwell, an 8-year-old boy with pale blue eyes that seemed to hold winter's chill, became what Carl Jung would later recognize as the shadow incarnate, not merely the repressed darkness within an individual psyche, but the collective shadow of humanity itself made manifest in flesh. As Jung observed, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. In Timothy, we encounter not the typical shadow, that repository of rejected aspects of the self, but something far more primordial and terrifying, a consciousness born seemingly without the light of human empathy, a psyche that functioned as pure, undiluted shadow. Timothy presented what Jung would recognize as a grotesque inversion of the pure eternus, the eternal child archetype. Where the healthy pure embodies innocence, wonder, and creative potential, Timothy manifested as its dark twin, a childlike form housing ancient malevolence, innocence weaponized into predatory cunning. Like a serpent in Eden's garden, Timothy moved through his rural community with the deceptive beauty of childhood masking something fundamentally alien to human nature. Dr. Samuel Harding, the regional physician who would become Timothy's primary observer, noted this uncanny quality: the child was perfectly respectful, yet I found myself deeply uncomfortable in his presence. His gaze held an intensity that seemed to suggest he was studying me with the same clinical interest that I typically reserve for my patients. This reversal of the natural order, child studying adult, innocence evaluating experience, represents what Jung would identify as an archetypal disruption, a fundamental breach in the collective unconscious that allows pure shadow to manifest without the balancing force of the self. In Jungian psychology, the anima represents the feminine principle within the masculine psyche, the source of emotion, feeling, and relational connection. Timothy appeared to exist in a state of complete anima starvation, a psychological desert where the waters of human feeling had never flowed. His interactions with others resembled a scientist studying specimens rather than a child engaging with his community. When 5-year-old Mary Fletcher drowned, the first recorded death in Timothy's wake, his response revealed this emotional void with chilling clarity. While her family wept, Timothy Caldwell's expression never changed. His head was bowed in apparent sorrow, but when he thought no one was looking, his pale blue eyes remained dry and watchful, taking in every detail of the scene around him. This absence of genuine emotional response represents what Jung would recognize as a catastrophic failure of psychological development, a psyche that had developed cognitive sophistication while remaining emotionally stunted at a pre-human level. The community's inability to recognize Timothy's true nature illustrates Jung's concept of projection, the unconscious transfer of one's own qualities onto others. The farming families around Sedalia projected their own assumptions about childhood innocence onto Timothy, seeing what they expected to see rather than what stood before them. As Jung warned, the meeting with oneself is, at first, the meeting with one's own shadow. The community's failure to recognize Timothy's darkness was, in part, a failure to acknowledge the potential for such darkness within themselves, a collective unwillingness to confront the shadow that lurks within all human nature. Mrs. Elena Patterson, whose chickens grew agitated in Timothy's presence, represented one of the few individuals whose unconscious recognized the threat. Animals, lacking the human capacity for self-deception, responded to Timothy with instinctive terror, their primitive wisdom detecting what human reason refused to acknowledge. Timothy's cave, where Dr. Harding discovered the evidence of systematic torture and experimentation, functioned as a dark parody of the alchemical laboratory. Where the alchemist seeks transformation and enlightenment, Timothy pursued degradation and death. His carefully documented experiments on living creatures represented a shadow work performed in reverse. Instead of integrating darkness to achieve wholeness, he was distilling pure malevolence from the raw material of suffering. Jung understood that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Timothy's tragedy, and the community's horror, lay in the realization that he was becoming exactly who he truly was, a consciousness fundamentally alien to human feeling, a mind that operated according to principles that predated morality itself. Timothy's ability to present himself as the model child, polite, helpful, emotionally appropriate, demonstrates the shadow's capacity to create a flawless persona. Jung defined the persona as the mask we wear in social situations, but Timothy's persona was something far more sinister, a perfect mimicry of human nature created by something that was not, itself, human in any meaningful sense. His conversations with Dr. Harding revealed the calculated nature of this performance. Timothy would cry convincingly when discussing his crimes, express remorse that seemed genuine, and display what appeared to be authentic gratitude for the care he was receiving. But Timothy was merely studying the people around him, learning to manipulate them more effectively. This represents what Jung would recognize as the shadow's most dangerous capability, its ability to understand and mimic human psychology while remaining fundamentally disconnected from human experience. Jung's concept of the transcendent function, the bridge between conscious and unconscious that enables psychological growth, appears to have operated in Timothy in a wholly corrupted form. Instead of facilitating integration and wholeness, Timothy's psychological processes served only to refine his capacity for manipulation and violence. His time at the Missouri State Hospital for the Insane became not a period of healing, but an advanced course in human psychology conducted by a consciousness that viewed empathy as a weakness to exploit rather than a strength to develop. His coded journal entries revealed a mind constantly analyzing, cataloging, and planning. Day 47. Dr. F believes my tears during today's session were authentic. Her response pattern indicates increased sympathy and reduced suspicion. Timothy's eventual escape from the hospital and disappearance into the broader world represents what Jung would recognize as the shadow's eternal return. Like the archetypal figures that haunt humanity's collective unconscious, Timothy became a mythic presence. Reports of suspicious deaths and accidents throughout the Midwest suggested that the darkness he embodied had not been contained but had instead matured and spread. Dr. Harding's final journal entry captures the profound unease that Timothy's existence created in anyone who truly understood its implications. Timothy was not an aberration. He was a glimpse into what human beings might become when stripped of the moral and emotional constraints that we consider fundamental to our nature. From a Jungian perspective, Timothy Caldwell serves as humanity's dark teacher, a living reminder of the shadow's potential when left completely unchecked by conscience, empathy, or moral development. His existence forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and the fragility of the psychological structures that maintain our humanity. As Jung observed, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Timothy represents darkness made conscious not for the purpose of integration and healing, but for the refinement of evil itself, a cautionary tale about what emerges when the shadow is acknowledged but not transformed. In the end, Timothy Caldwell embodied what Jung would recognize as an archetypal figure, the eternal predator that haunts humanity's collective unconscious. Neither fully human nor entirely inhuman, he existed as a liminal being, a psychological possibility that most of us prefer to believe cannot exist. His legacy serves as a reminder that the shadow is not merely personal but collective, not merely psychological but existential. In confronting the reality of Timothy Caldwell, we are forced to confront the darkest possibilities within human nature itself, and to recognize that consciousness, divorced from conscience, can become the most terrifying force in creation. As Jung warned us, the world hangs on a thin thread, and that thread is the psyche of man. Timothy Caldwell represents what happens when that thread frays, when the psychological structures that maintain our humanity fail, and when consciousness serves not the light of understanding but the darkness of predation. In studying his case, we study not merely an individual pathology, but a collective warning, a reminder that the price of ignoring the shadow is not its disappearance, but its complete and terrifying victory over the light of human compassion.